My name is Raymond, and I've spent over 10 years working as a gravedigger in a small town called Maple Hollow, tucked away in northern Oregon. Nothing ever happens here. No new faces show up, and the ones who leave end up where I work. I got used to the silence of the pine trees, the distant crowing of roosters at dawn, and the crunch of dry earth beneath my boots. Death doesn't frighten anyone around here, or at least that's what I used to think. After so many years, surrounded by tombstones and mausoleums, I believed I'd seen it all. But what happened one November night still sends shivers through me every time I close my eyes. And the worst part, I wasn't the only one it happened to. That afternoon had been uneventful. The burial was quick, with only 4 people crying quietly and a plain wooden coffin lowered into the grave. By nightfall, I was alone in the cemetery, putting away the tools and leveling the loose soil. The moon barely peeked through the clouds, and the air felt thick, almost muddy. That's when something strange happened. While flattening the ground with the shovel, I heard a dry knock. Not the usual sound of hitting a rock. This one was hollow, like striking an empty box. I froze, scanned my surroundings. The cemetery was silent, as always, but something felt off. I thrust the shovel back into the same spot. Knock, that echo again. It wasn't a root or stone, it was something else. My instincts screamed to leave it alone, to walk away, but I didn't. I knelt down and began digging with my hands, moving the soil carefully. The deeper I dug, the harder it became to breathe. The air grew heavy, almost suffocating. My chest tightened, but I couldn't stop. Something inside me, a twisted mix of fear and curiosity, pushed me forward. And then I saw it. A wooden chest, old, with rusted edges and caked in mud. What chilled my blood wasn't its look, it was the symbols etched into the lid. They weren't letters or numbers. They looked like carvings meant to confuse anyone who saw them. Not religious, not native, not anything I'd ever seen. Older, darker. There was no lock, but the lid wouldn't budge, as if something unseen held it shut. I sat there in the darkness, hands filthy, heart racing, and a voice in my head begging me not to touch it, to leave it alone, bury it again, and never speak of it. But if you love horror stories, if you're subscribed and have that bell turned on, you know no one finds something like this and just walks away. That was the beginning of everything. I can't say how long I sat there staring at the chest. It was like time held its breath. No crickets, no wind through the cypress trees. Just me, the cold, and that box buried where nothing should have been. With effort, I lifted it from the earth. It weighed more than it looked. I could feel something invisible pulling it back down. I carried it to an old tool shed behind a crumbling chapel within the same cemetery. That was my resting spot during long shifts, where I sometimes napped between burials. I placed the chest on a concrete table, sat across from it. It stared back at me. The carved symbols were deep, rough to the touch. The wood reeked of damp rot, like it had soaked in stagnant water for decades. For a second I hesitated, and for the first time in years I felt real fear. Not the fear of being caught, fear of what might come out of that box. I grabbed a rusty spatula and tried to pry the lid open. It creaked like it was protesting, like it knew I was doing something wrong. But I didn't stop. I pressed harder. Then, with a sharp snap, it gave way. A stench burst out instantly, so foul it forced me back. It was a blend of wet soil, rotting flesh, and some chemical I couldn't place. But the smell wasn't the worst part. It was the jewelry. Yes, jewelry, piles of it. Necklaces with crimson and emerald stones, gold rings, bracelets with such intricate designs they looked newly made. Some pieces were tangled together, others shone brightly, clean, flawless, as if someone had placed them there just hours before. I froze. I'd never seen so many valuable items in one place, especially not in a box buried beneath a graveyard where we only laid to rest humble folks, people with no family, no money. It made no sense. No one buries things like that by mistake. This wasn't forgotten treasure. This was hidden. And the more I looked, the more I wanted to shut the chest and run. But I didn't. I couldn't. Something about the jewelry had me under a spell. not just its beauty. It was as if the colors, the shapes, spoke to me, whispered that they were mine now, that I had found them, that I didn't need to share them with anyone. I tried to convince myself it was luck. Maybe someone hid them during a war, or they were loot from some long-forgotten thief. But deep down, I knew that wasn't true. That night, I decided not to take anything home. I covered the chest with an old blanket, locked the tool shed, and left, but not before glancing back one last time. And I could swear, one of the rings had moved. I didn't sleep that night. I closed my eyes many times, but each time sleep tried to come, the image of that open chest returned. The shining jewels, the carved symbols, and worse, the faint twitch I'd seen in one of the rings before locking the door. I wanted to believe I'd imagined it, but I didn't. The next morning, the first thing I did was return to the shed. The padlock was still there. The blanket still covered the chest. But as soon as I stepped inside, the air thickened again, like the humidity wrapped around my throat, forcing me to stay. I approached carefully, pulled back the blanket, and there they were, gleaming just like before. I thought about how much I owed. My rent back in Hillcrest had been overdue for 3 months. The power had already been shut off once. If things kept going like this, I'd end up sleeping among the empty caskets stored in the cemetery's warehouse. So I gathered some courage, took a few smaller pieces, placed them in a cloth bag, and headed to Riverford, a nearby town where few people knew me. I looked for a jeweler someone had once recommended, an older man named Mr. Donaldson. Quiet, serious, with shaky hands, the type who didn't ask too many questions. I sat across from him as he opened the bag. His face changed. First, a frown. Then he pulled out a magnifier, followed by a scale. Minutes passed. I broke into a cold sweat. I didn't know if he was about to call the cops or kick me out, but what he said took my breath away. This isn't ordinary, son. If this is real, and it seems it is, you've got pieces here worth more than 2 decent houses, and not the small kind. I didn't know what to say. I laughed nervously like he was joking, but he didn't smile. He looked at me suspiciously, then lowered his voice. "Where did you find this?" I said nothing, just shrugged. Told him it belonged to a distant relative who'd passed. I don't know if he believed me, but he didn't push. He offered me some money for a few items. Not a fortune, but enough to clear some urgent debts. I agreed. Left with bills in my pocket, but a knot in my throat. On the surface, it seemed like a good deal. Inside, something felt wrong, like I hadn't gotten rid of anything, like what I now carried with me was more than gold. That night when I got home, something was different. Pancho, my dog, didn't greet me at the door like usual. I heard him barking wildly from the backyard. I rushed out, thinking it was another dog or some stray animal, but what I saw sent a chill straight down my spine. He was standing in front of the wall, fur bristled, eyes fixed on a shadowed corner. He growled like he was confronting something I couldn't see. I tried to soothe him, call his name, even reach out to touch him, but he ignored me completely. He wasn't looking at an animal. He was seeing something else, and even though I didn't see it, I felt it. That night, I barely slept, jumping at every creak the house made, convinced each one was a threat. Pancho didn't stop barking until dawn. When he finally quieted down, he crawled under the kitchen table and didn't come out for the rest of the day. I tried telling myself it was all just coincidence. The dog, the fear, the chest. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Maybe the stress from the debt and my exhaustion were taking a heavier toll than I realized. So, to keep from losing my mind, I decided to visit the jeweler again, this time with more pieces, smaller ones, less flashy. I walked back to the same shop in Riverford, hoping for another quick deal. But when I arrived, something stopped me cold. There was a piece of paper taped to the glass door, a message handwritten in ink, blurred by the early morning rain. Closed due to mourning. Mr. Donaldson has passed away. It felt like the ground opened beneath me. I stood frozen, bag in hand, unable to move. The same man who had spoken to me just hours ago was now dead. A heart attack, an accident, no one knew. No one said anything. I returned to Maple Hollow, shaking, trying to convince myself it was just a terrible coincidence. But deep down, I didn't buy it. The next day, when I showed up at the cemetery for work, the last bit of doubt vanished. On the burial list pinned to the old wooden board, his name was there. Donaldson Arthur Lee. I was the one assigned to dig his grave, the one who would lay him to rest. I swallowed hard and grabbed the tools. My palms were slick with sweat, each shovelful of dirt dragging me deeper into something dark, something I didn't understand. When the casket arrived, only 3 people accompanied it, all confused, crying quietly. No one seemed to understand what had happened. Before closing the coffin, protocol always demands a final check, I opened the lid and nearly fell back in shock. Mr. Donaldson, with pale skin and eyes sealed shut, wore on his finger a gold ring with a red stone in the center. The same ring I had seen at the bottom of that cursed chest just 2 days earlier. I didn't know how he got it. Maybe he took it without telling me. Maybe I handed it to him without realizing. But there it was, and now he was gone. I closed the lid with trembling hands. That night I swore I was done, that I wouldn't touch another piece of that jewelry, that I would bury it again, destroy it if I could. But one thing has always been stronger than fear: desperation. And mine was just getting started. Tap the yellow lamp icon and stick with us so we can uncover more terrifying mysteries together. The following night was the longest of my life. As soon as the sun disappeared, the atmosphere inside the house changed. The air turned heavy, almost choking, like I was breathing in something ancient and rotten. Pancho refused to enter. He lay down at the doorstep, whimpering softly as if he knew something was waiting for him inside. I tried to carry on like normal, made some rice, went over my bills, even tried to distract myself with television. But it was useless. At exactly 11, the screen shut off. I thought it was a blackout. But instead of going dark, the screen came back on. A dead channel, nothing but static. Except this wasn't regular static. Through the white noise, I heard something else. Voices, warped whispers, like someone murmuring from behind a thick wall. Broken words, stretched out names, and one of them was mine. I turned the TV off immediately, went to the kitchen looking for anything to distract me. When I opened the fridge, the lights flickered, and as I shut it, music started playing. Old music. A tune I didn't recognize. It came from the antique radio I kept on a shelf, but I hadn't turned it on. I walked toward it, and the melody, something from the 1940s, sung by a woman with a trembling voice, distorted as I approached. The lyrics were unintelligible. As I reached out to switch it off, the song began to slow, like someone was stretching time itself. I yanked the plug, stood still, sweat rolling down my back. And still, that wasn't the worst part. As I passed through the hallway, I felt a cold breeze brush against my arm, as if someone, unseen, had walked right past me. I turned quickly. Nothing, just shadows. But then I saw it in the bathroom mirror. It wasn't my reflection. It was another face behind mine, pale, empty, staring with a hollow expression. I spun around, no one there. I ran to the kitchen, gasping for air, trying to flee the madness overtaking my home, and that's when I saw it. The chest, I had left it sealed, covered. But the lid was slightly ajar, like someone had carefully opened it just minutes before I entered. I walked closer. The jewelry was still inside, but no longer arranged as before, scattered, tangled, as if someone had touched them or worn them. I froze. In the darkest corner of the kitchen, where light couldn't reach, I saw something. A shape, crouched, motionless. 2 faintly glowing eyes in the shadows like embers. I took a breath, blinked, and it vanished. But the feeling stayed, stuck to my skin. The wall clock had stopped. Its hands no longer moved. Outside, Pancho started growling, low, steady, as if he no longer expected me to come out, as if he knew there was nothing left to save. That night, I realized the house wasn't cursed. I was. By morning, I told myself everything was just stress, sleep deprivation, an exhausted mind playing tricks. I tried to fake normalcy, took a freezing shower, made coffee I couldn't drink, and forced myself to think practically. I needed cash, fast, a lot. With shaking hands, I picked out more pieces from the chest, wrapped them in a towel, tucked them in a plastic bag, and headed to a distant neighborhood on the edge of Tecalpan. I wasn't about to repeat the mistake of going back to the same place, not after what happened to Mr. Donaldson. This time, the jeweler's name was Luis, a younger man, unkempt beard, wary eyes. When I laid the jewelry out on the counter, his expression changed instantly. He grabbed a magnifying glass, then a scale. He didn't say much, just examined each item in silence, like he was seeing something deeply unsettling. "Where'd you get this?" he asked at last, eyes still fixed on the gold. I gave him the same answer I'd told Donaldson. "An old inheritance, nothing major." "This stuff isn't normal, man," he muttered while placing the pieces into a metal box. He offered me a large sum, more than I expected, and though something inside screamed that I was stepping deeper into the abyss, I accepted without hesitation, took the cash and went home feeling strange, not happy, not relieved, just emptier. In the days that followed, I tried to pull my life together, paid the overdue rent, bought groceries, replaced the broken television, even had the car repaired. But then strange things began happening. Bills I had already paid came back again. They charged me amounts I knew were cleared. The electricity, which should have lasted at least another month, was shut off without notice. The car, after 3 days of running fine, stalled in the middle of the road and never turned on again. Everything I bought started to fail. Light bulbs exploded, locks jammed, the fridge stopped cooling, and the money vanished, like water slipping through my fingers. No matter how much came in, it was gone, fast, without a trace. By the end of the month, I was almost exactly where I had started, only now more afraid. What disturbed me most was that the chest was still in my kitchen. I tried to move it, hide it, cover it, but it always returned to that same place, the same table, like it had a mind of its own. Pancho no longer stayed with me. He slept outside, far from the house, watched me with eyes I didn't recognize, as if I wasn't the same person anymore. And that's when I understood something I didn't want to admit, that gold wasn't a blessing. It was bait, a trap, and I'd taken the bait more than once. The nights became endless. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, something whispered from the dark. Voices that weren't mine, not even human. Sometimes I felt breathing behind me. I'd turn in bed, no one there, just shadows. One morning, I woke drenched in sweat. The air in the room was freezing, but my skin burned. I stumbled to the bathroom, my legs barely obeying, looked at myself in the mirror, and didn't recognize the face staring back. Deep, dark circles, pale skin, sunken eyes. I looked like I'd aged 10 years in a week, and it wasn't my imagination. Since that night, something began to follow me. It didn't matter if I was at home, in the cemetery, or at the corner store. That presence was always there. I couldn't see it clearly, but I felt its weight, a heaviness on my shoulders. A stare drilled into the back of my neck, a chill that never left. Pancho no longer barked, he just stayed quiet, watching me from a distance. Sometimes he whimpered, as if he pitied me or feared me. One night, I heard footsteps on the roof, slow, dragging steps, like someone barefoot was walking across the shingles. I grabbed a flashlight and climbed up, checked every inch, found nothing. But when I came back down, I froze in place. The chest was open again, and this time the jewelry wasn't just scattered. Some pieces were gone. I searched the floor, under the table, between the cushions. Nothing. They were specific items, the brightest, most eye-catching ones, as if someone had chosen them carefully, or they had chosen to leave on their own. That same night, I saw the figure. It was standing in the kitchen doorway, tall, thin, arms hanging by its sides. It had no face, just an empty void where its eyes should have been. And yet, I knew it was staring at me. A blow struck my chest. I stumbled back, hit a chair, and fell. When I looked up, It was gone. I thought I was losing my mind, but what came next proved it wasn't in my imagination. I woke up with scratches on my back, long slashes, like invisible claws had raked across my skin while I slept. They didn't bleed much, but they burned. Each mark seemed part of a design, a symbol I couldn't decipher. My body started to weaken. I lost my appetite. Everything tasted like dust. I had a fever, but thermometers read normal. I drifted around the house like a ghost, dragging my feet, unsure if it was day or night. And in the middle of that decay, I realized something terrifying. I was no longer me. I had brought something into my life that was slowly hollowing me out. It didn't just want my money or peace of mind. It wanted my flesh, my soul, my story. And the worst part is that I was the one who invited it in. The nights became endless. I tried to sleep, but every time I closed my eyes, something whispered from the darkness, voices that didn't belong to me or to anything human. Sometimes I felt breathing behind me. I'd turn in bed, nothing, only shadows. One early morning I woke drenched in sweat. The air was icy, but my body burned. I staggered to the bathroom, legs barely obeying. I looked in the mirror, and for a moment I didn't recognize myself. Deep shadows under my eyes, skin pale, sunken cheeks. I looked like I'd aged a decade in a week, and it wasn't a dream. Since that night, something has been with me, at home, in the cemetery, at the shop, always. I couldn't see it clearly, but I could feel it. A presence pressing on me, watching, making my skin crawl. Pancho had stopped barking entirely, just sat at a distance, eyes locked on me. Sometimes he whimpered, like he was mourning something that hadn't died yet. One night, I heard dragging footsteps on the roof again, barefoot, slow. I grabbed my flashlight and searched, nothing. But when I returned inside, the chest was cracked open, and this time, some of the brightest jewels were missing. I looked everywhere, under cushions on the floor. They were gone, as if taken carefully, or as if they had walked off on their own. That same night, I saw the shape, standing in the kitchen doorway, thin, tall, arms hanging, no face, just black emptiness where the eyes should have been. But I knew it was watching me. I gasped, stumbled, fell. By the time I looked again, it was gone. I feared I was going insane, but the truth came in the days that followed. I began waking up with fresh marks across my back, deep scratches like claws. They stung, bled slightly, and always followed the same strange patterns. I was wasting away. My appetite vanished. Everything tasted like ash. Fever pulsed through me, though every thermometer said I was fine. I roamed the house like a wraith, numb, aimless, until I understood. I had brought something into my world that was feeding on me, not just my thoughts or my energy. It wanted to erase me, bit by bit, and I had welcomed it in. The maintenance shack at the cemetery, that tiny room where I used to hide from the cold or harsh sun, became my entire world. I slept on an old foam pad, wrapped in damp blankets. Outside, among the bent cypresses and rusted crosses, life, or whatever remained of it, passed without me. My body failed me. I lost so much weight, my bones jutted through my skin, my nails cracked, fever visited every night, yet thermometers still showed nothing. I sweated cold, clammy, as if my body was trying to expel something, but couldn't, and my mind began to disappear too. I forgot simple things, names, words, even who I was. Sometimes I'd wake thinking I was still in my old house, only to open my eyes and see tools hanging on the shack's moldy walls. The most disturbing thing was what happened at night. I'd wake up in strange places. Once, I opened my eyes standing beside an open grave, shovel in hand. Other times I found myself in the chapel, lighting candles I didn't remember carrying. My feet were muddy, my hands dirty, as if I had kept digging in my sleep. And the cemetery let me. No one spoke to me in town anymore. Some said I had gone mad, talking to myself, wandering among tombstones for days, muttering in a language no one understood. Others claimed to have seen me walking at night with an unlit flashlight, following a voice only I could hear. I began hearing things from beneath the ground. Soft thuds, moans, muffled voices whispering my name. Sometimes the graves seemed to breathe. The grass swayed when there was no wind. Crosses turned as if watching me. Pancho was gone. One morning he left and never returned. Maybe he knew before I did that there was no going back. And in that absolute solitude, I understood the final truth. I wasn't a gravedigger anymore. I was a guest, an offering, a limb of whatever I had awakened when I opened that chest. I was becoming part of the evil I had unleashed. The cemetery I once tended with respect was now feeding on me, like roots sucking poison. And I, too weak to fight it, let it happen, because deep down I knew I wouldn't leave that place. Not alive, not as I was. And each night as I shut my eyes, another piece of me dissolved, while something ancient took its place. In my final days, I could barely stand. My joints cracked with every step. My hands trembled too much to grip a shovel. But still, I dug, not out of duty, not from habit. I dug because something inside me demanded it. One especially cold morning, I stumbled from the shack, body stiff, eyes blank. I dragged myself through the cemetery as if something guided me. I stopped between two ancient pines, a spot where no one had ever been buried, and I started to dig. Shovelful after shovelful, the soil gave way easily, as if it had been waiting for me. My arms, weak as they were, moved like they were being pulled by someone else. Each time the blade struck a root, I felt no pain, only calm, surrender. I don't know how long it took, but the hole grew deeper than any I'd ever made. I looked down. Blackness, silence, the bottom of a well with no return. And I knew that was my place. Not a grave, a belonging. I returned to the shack and collapsed onto the mattress. Fever surged, but there was no sweat. My throat dry, my eyes burned, voices circled me, no longer whispers, clear, commanding, and I obeyed. I never woke again after that night. Someone, I don't know who, found the shovel stabbed into the ground beside the hole. The pit was open. My body was never found. Only my uniform hung neatly on a rusty nail, and an old notebook, all pages blank. Some say I just wandered off, got lost in the woods, or in madness. That isolation broke my mind. But the townspeople, they know the truth. No one dares pass by the cemetery after dark. Some say they've seen a figure walking between the graves, shovel slung over his shoulder, eyes glowing like embers. Others swear they've heard the earth shifting by itself, like someone still digging from below. The chest was never found. The jewels never resurfaced. But sometimes the bold ones who approach the graveyard say that if you stand in absolute silence, you can hear more than just the wind. A moan, a whisper, a name, Raymond. And every now and then, a fresh grave appears by sunrise, empty, waiting.